Hey, I swear to God, I'm going to make this super quick. I just want to let you guys know something that you probably noticed in the last episode and or on previous episodes that I may or may not have missed. If you've ever joined me on a live stream episode and you hear me recording thy stories, there is a device that I press repeatedly that helps plume my WAV files so I know when there's a mistake and I can easily go back in, fix the mistake, move on with the story. You hear this? That's what I used. I know for a fact you heard that in the last episode because within the first story, I missed 2 of them. Again, I'm human. I make mistakes, and I thought about like deleting the episode and then, fixing it and then doing all that, but it was a pain in the ass. Didn't feel like doing that. I figured majority of you probably didn't mind. I'm sure there's a handful, if not more, that were like, yeah, I'm sure you were probably pissed or annoyed, whatever. I apologize. Again, I'm human. I try not to make those mistakes and or miss those mistakes. But I can't promise you it might never happen again because it probably will happen again. So if you heard that, that's what it is. Sorry about that. Please forgive me, or you can stone me to death, whatever you want to do, your choice. Yeah, that's it. That's all. I will leave you the hell alone. Enjoy these oregano stories, and yeah. We picked a weekend pretty late in March, the first one with no projected rain or snow. I booked a pay-to-use campground outside this small Oregon lake town. Sites with picnic tables, bear boxes, and of course some bathrooms. It wasn't total wilderness, but I guess really that was the whole point. Ness had lost her job in January. I'd been grinding overtime. We needed something easy, a restart button. 2 nights, no phones, I told her. Catch a few trout, sleep like normal people. What do you say? She smiled and I knew that's all it took. She was all in. We rolled up just after noon on Friday. Ponderosas ringed the lake, tall and yellow barked, and the air was nice and crisp. Our site sat near the back, butted up against the woods on one side and another side about 150 yards to the right. I could hear laughter from the far loops, clinks of pans and a dog barking every now and again. It felt like a neighborhood built out of nylon. We set up our tent, strung up a tarp, and stacked the coolers inside the shade. Ness had laid out this little cutesy touches, checkered tablecloth, enamel mugs, a few big candles. She was making it our own experience, and I really loved her for that. By mid-afternoon, we were on the small dock, our bobbers riding on the top water, sun in our faces, shoulder to shoulder, not really speaking. The winter felt 2 counties away. Back at camp, I noticed the neighbors. Husband, wife, and a kid who looked to be about 10. They had a pop-up trailer and a truck with mismatched doors. The man carried himself like a linebacker gone to seed, big chest, thick all over. He met my eyes once and gave me that nod that didn't really feel friendly. Let's just keep to ourselves, I said. That's fine by me, Ness said. Just us. It started small. Around 4 that afternoon, while we were gutting the day's catch, a woman's voice cut through the campground, sharp and angry, and a man shouted back. It didn't sound like they were just palling around either. Ness looked up from the cooler. You hear that? Yeah, maybe they're arguing over firewood. But the way the sound carried and echoed off the trees, it had that edge, It was something personal. When it came again, a slam and a curse word followed. It felt violent. I scanned the campgrounds, and sure enough, it was that couple from next door. That boy sat on a log, still as stone, staring at the dirt. The woman, I'm guessing his mother, was red-faced and wiping at her cheeks. The man's hands were moving angrily, chopping at the air. His voice broke. Not drunk exactly, but uncontrollable. You don't tell me what to do, what I can or can't do. I turned away and Ness did too, but it would continue coming back in waves throughout the evening. The shouts, the slammed cooler lids, the harsh zip of a window or a sleeping bag. By nightfall, it was really hard to relax. The sound of them would bleed through the trees, and I kept expecting the man to come stomping through our camp at some point. Ness whispered over to me, "Should we tell somebody?" Let's just wait and see that maybe it hopefully will blow over. We crawled into our tent early, but just when sleep started to pull at me, the shouting flared up again and it sounded crueler this time. I could make out every word, every insult, and the mother crying in the background, the kid muttering something, and then there was this noise, like a slap. Ness flinched next to me. I can't do this. This is bad. I reached out for her hand. I know, babe. The rest of the night the forest went still, not peaceful in the slightest, but there was like this bomb in the sky above us. Morning would come gray and cold. I unzipped the tent and saw the man pacing beside his truck, smoking. His wife stood at the picnic table, head down, and the boy watched from inside the pop-up. Ness brewed some coffee, and neither of us said a word until the man took his son by the arm, led him toward the trailer that curved up into the hills. His voice was calm now. Maybe, hopefully, he was coming out of it. For a few brief hours, the campground returned to normal. The kids were biking down a dirt road. Air smelled like pancakes and wood smoke. Ness laughed at my jokes. We actually took the canoe out, drifted across the lake, and she leaned back and closed her eyes. Think they'll leave soon? She asked me. I really hope so, I said back. By the time we paddled in, we saw that they had returned. The piece ended the second our feet touched the shore. I heard him before I saw him, yelling again, voice echoing through those trees. His wife had tried to talk him down, but her voice was cracking. He threw something, metal I think, and it clattered and rolled into the brush. I felt that same crawling on knees, heading back in. Who does this, out here in front of all to see? Ness whispered over to me. He's gonna hurt somebody. All right, stay here. I started walking, and halfway toward their camp, I called out, Hey man, take it easy. Everybody can hear you around here. He turned on me like a snake, his eyes bright and glassy. You got a problem, buddy? Buddy. I couldn't wait to get a piece of this guy. He laughed at me. You worried about your little girlfriend, huh? Now it was my turn to smile. Worried about you? Man, you're yelling at your wife and your kid. Nothing about you worries me. You're just plain annoying. Like I mentioned, everybody can hear you. We paid for this spot, and we damn sure didn't pay for it with the intention of listening to you ruin your family's lives. So how about you turn the volume down a little bit, huh? He stared at me for a long second, jaw flexing, and then stepped back. Fine, whatever. I went back to Ness thinking it was handled, but I could feel him now watching us all evening. Every time I looked up, he was there by the fire, half-lit, staring across the space between our camps. As the forest darkened, the smell of smoke became super heavy, and Ness whispered over to me again. I'm ready to go home tomorrow. Yeah, we will, I said back. But as the fire crackled down to embers, the man's voice rose up once more. Definitely drunk this time, shouting nonsense off into the trees. A crash soon followed, wood splitting and something heavy falling. Then quiet fell again. I realized I hadn't heard the boy in a while, which really worried me. Ness and I sat next to the fire, pretending to read, pretending not to listen. But every word that carried across the space would hit us like gunfire. Soon after came a thud, something heavy striking metal, and his wife screamed. I stood up, and before I even knew what I was doing, I was screaming. Enough! I yelled across the dark. Hey, like I said before, people are trying to camp here. The man froze where he stood, and a beer can was dangling from his hand. Slowly, he turned back toward our firelight. I couldn't see his eyes, but I could feel them. I really hope you're not talking to me, he said back. Yeah, I am. My pulse was hammering now. You need to stop. There's kids out here, dude. He took a few steps closer, his boots crunching through the pine needles. You, think you got something for me? He said. Ness stood up beside me. We're calling the police. And that flipped some kind of switch. He charged at us, stumbling through the dark, muttering insults along the way. I stepped between him and the tent, bracing myself, but this dude was big. The first shove knocked me back, and the second sent me fumbling into the chair, almost into the fire pit. Sparks lifted into the air as we scuffled. He lunged again, and we hit the dirt together, wrestling for control. His breath was hot and sour and frantic. Ness was crying, shouting that help was coming, and that people were watching. The campground was loud now, doors unzipping, flashlights cutting through the shadows.
"Let him go!"
somebody yelled.
"Leave him alone!"
The man hesitated, chest heaving, and that was all it took. 4 or 5 other campers came running, one with a mag light the size of a club. They formed a line with very little communication. The man looked around confused, humiliated, and cornered. He spat into the dirt and backed away.
"She started it,"
he mumbled.
"You all saw."
Nobody responded, nobody said a word. He turned and sulked back to his site, and immediately began tearing it apart, stuffing half his gear into the truck, the rest flung into the brush. His wife moved quickly, collecting the boys' things, and the kid just stood there, arms wrapped around himself. He'd seen this 1,000 times. When they finally roared out of the campground, dust followed them down that road until taillights disappeared behind the trees. For a long time, nobody moved or said anything. Then the woman with the flashlight just exhaled. "Jesus Christ," she said. A man called the ranger station from his truck. They said they'd already gotten a few reports. Said the guy hadn't made it far. Park ranger stopped him near the jurisdiction, drunk and belligerent. He was in custody. Now that should have been the end of it, but I continued to take it with me, into the tent, and I just couldn't sleep. Ness snored beside me, finally asleep, but I kept seeing his face, those wide, furious eyes before he backed down. I worried about his wife and that poor kid. Sometime after midnight, a car passed on the far road, its headlights flashing through the mesh of my tent for just a brief moment, lighting everything up in pale blue. Another noise then followed, a cough of gravel, a slow engine idling somewhere nearby. I sat up, heart pounding and listening. The sound then faded and then stopped. Maybe it was nothing, or maybe it was him, driving past to get a look. I stayed awake until dawn, just listening to the forest breathe around me. The next morning, a ranger came by, told us the man had been arrested for DUI. His family had been sent home with relatives. Told us we could stay another night if we wanted to. We didn't. We packed up in silence and drove out of that campground and didn't even really talk about it again. I really hope that guy got some kind of help, and I hope his family is doing a lot better. I grew up on the strip of Oregon that many called home. The town's stitched all together along Highway 101. People called it pretty, but I call it boring. The ocean swallows everything and pukes it up along the coast. The woods hide all kinds of weirdos, even meth labs. Our storms will knock out power for days on end, and when the waves get mean, they throw logs the sides of boxcars. You learn early on that living here means caught in the crossfire between man and nature. Every grown-up would warn us about different dangers: elk on blind curves, rip currents that look like safe water, drifters who will sleep in culverts and come out at dusk with glassy eyes and wandering hands. But my favorite fear, if you can call it that, was the bandage man. Folks would tell it to you straight, but everybody had their own version of it. Not a ghost in that moaning chains kind of way, a man wrapped in this dirty gauze who might show up anywhere. The oldest version started back in the 40s or the 50s when mills were running day and night to feed the war and everything else. A saw pulled in a man, arms, chest, all of him. They got what was left to an ambulance at Cannon Beach and then headed south. There's a bend there, this nasty one, where the road leans and the trees crowd in. The story goes that the ambulance flipped, and when the police arrived, the driver and medic were pulled out in the ditch. The back doors hung open, the stretcher was empty, no sign of the man. wrapped in gauze. The bandage man is the legend that he turned into after. People swear they've seen him on that stretch, lurching between the spruce, hitching rides, slapping the tailgate of teenagers who thought making out on the overlook was a good idea. A walking mistake, wrapped up in wandering. Urbans will say it's some kind of campfire tale, but out here, we keep our eyes open on the shoulder and don't slow down. Slowing down is how you vanish. Alright, I'm just messing with you. We don't believe in him either. And I never really thought about it growing up. The bandage man was like Bigfoot or the green chain ghost at the old sawmill. Something to keep those younger kids scared and the older ones entertained. But a few years back, I saw something out there that made me wonder. It was early spring. Me and a few college buddies were up from Corvallis, camping near the coast and playing this lazy round of our makeshift frisbee golf course. We'd hit all the little state parks north of Tillamook. Just a bunch of broke students with gas money and a little too much free time. That weekend, we set up near this abandoned logging road that cut up through the thick spruce. It was nice and quiet out there. I remember not hearing or seeing a soul. We were 3 holes in when Paul and I kind of threw a little bit long. The wind caught our discs and carried them into the trees, way off of the fairway. Everybody else stayed back, cracking beers and arguing about the next hole. Paul and I trudged in, laughing about who'd thrown worse, and it was definitely him. The woods swallowed the noise once we got out into the trees, just the 2 of us and the constant whisper of branches. It was really dark back there, that deep green black light you really only get when you're on the coast. After a few minutes, I realized how far we wandered in and just how dark it had gotten. You see yours anywhere? I called out to him. No, not yet, Paul said somewhere off to my right. Damn, it smells like something died back here. He wasn't kidding, the air had gone really sour. It was thick like hot garbage and roadkill. I covered my nose with my sleeve. Jesus, I muttered. Dead raccoon or something. Let's just find the frisbees and get out of here. Then I noticed these white strips hanging from the branches above me. I thought they were old survey ribbons or something until I looked closer. It was gauze. Dirty, stiff, and frayed gauze, tangled up in the limbs. Hey man, come here, I said. You gotta see this. Paul came crunching over through the ferns. You find your disc? No, but look up. He tilted his head. What the hell is that? There were more pieces everywhere now, strung between the trees, dragging in the wind. I caught a whiff of something rotten, and then I saw the first carcass. A squirrel, no, maybe a rabbit, torn open, bones gleaming white with the fur. Then another and another. Paul gagged next to me. Oh, we should go back. Yeah, I said back to him, but I didn't move. Something about it felt fake to me. The gauze wasn't scattered, it was placed, hung, seeming to me like some kind of setup. Paul spotted this flash of color through the brush and jogged over. Found it, he said, holding up his frisbee like a trophy. Then he laughed a little shaky. Let's get the hell out. He froze. What? What is it? I asked. He didn't answer me. His face was changed though, mouth open, eyes glassy, like he'd seen a snake, and I followed his stare. There was a man standing behind the trees, and I almost missed him. He blended so well with the pale trunks. He was wrapped head to toe in bandages. They were filthy, brown-stained gauze sagging off of him in these matted ribbons. His chest was heaving under it, like breathing was painful for him. He wasn't moving either, just kind of standing there, facing us. Paul? I whispered. Do you see that? Paul screamed, a sudden explosion that sent the birds overhead flapping for safety. He bolted, crashing through the brush back toward the others. I quickly stumbled after him, but looked back once more. The bandaged man was still there, except he wasn't standing anymore. He was crawling fast like a wounded animal, dragging himself through the ferns. His breath was coming in these wet, sucking sounds, and I turned and ran so fast that I almost lost my shoes, tripping over roots, branches clawing at my face along the way. By the time I burst back into the clearing, everybody was doubled over laughing. Paul was white as a ghost, swearing up and down that we'd seen something. He tried to tell them about the smell, the gauze, and the man, and they called him full of shit. Said we'd maybe found some kind of tweaker's campsite or a deer carcass that spooked us. I stood there trying to catch my breath, heart still jackhammering. The woods behind us had gone really quiet, no birds, no wind, just the sound of the ocean faint off in the distance. "Dude, I swear to God," Paul said again, but his voice cracked. "He was right there." Now, I didn't back him up right away. I wanted to believe it was indeed my nerves, that we saw a shadow or something. But the smell was still clinging to me. I could taste it. Rotten, antiseptic. That was that, though. Nobody believed us. We were just kind of left there with the fear. Hell, the others didn't even want to leave yet. We had to stay out there and finish the game. Paul and I, looking over our shoulders and backs the whole time. We packed up before sunset, and nobody said much on the drive out. Just a wiper squeaking over the windshield and the rain getting heavier. When we hit the highway, Paul started yelling for me to speed up. "What, dude, what?" I shouted at him, and he pointed behind us. Through the fogged rear window, I saw the tailgate bounce once, then again, like something had grabbed it, and for a brief second, I thought I saw a hand, white and wrapped tight, gripping the edges of the tailgate before we peeled off. My foot hit the pedal and we floored it until we hit the highway. When we pulled into town, the tailgate was clean, no dents, no marks, just the faintest streak of blood-colored mud drying up along the edge. Paul won't even talk to me about it anymore. He says I imagined the whole thing, the hand. And maybe he's right, but whenever I drive 101 now, I always keep my eye on the shoulder, and I never slow down, not for anything. We went to Oregon because Ross had clients up and down the coast, and because I'd never seen it, so it kind of just made for this perfect mix. A little work for him, a little vacation for me, both of us telling ourselves we'd make time for one another. We flew into Portland, rented a sedan, and traced Highway 101 like a finger along a map. Mist in the trees, towns that looked right out of a storybook. Ross took calls, and I watched the water. God, it was one of the best vacations of my life, at least at first. We switched hotels every night, business rates in Newport, a roadside lodge north of Florence, and then the prize. 2 nights at a bed and breakfast at 𝐬𝐶 Head Lighthouse. Ross had booked it months before. He'd shown me a photo of the White House units tucked under the green cliff and the lighthouse above it, like a watchman. "You'll sleep," he promised me. "You'll sleep like the dead." The place stood at the end of a narrow road that clung to the hillside. Park here and carry your life up the path. Salt in the air, gulls that sounded like they were laughing at us. Inside, everything was clean wood and framed black and whites. The innkeeper welcomed us, hit us with some small talk, the breakfast hours, and a list of walks that we should try before it got dark. I asked about the lighthouse tour, and she hesitated. Tomorrow," she said, "if the wind's down." In our room, the windows faced the ocean, and the bed was soft enough to swallow me whole. Ross threw himself onto it and almost sank to the floor. I unpacked, appreciating every single second, a place where we could shut the door on other people's needs, except for, of course, Ross's work calls. And those first 2 days were absolutely perfect. Ross would finish his calls early, and we'd walk the cliffs above that lighthouse, sea spray cutting the air like shrapnel. We ate chowder in yachts, took photos by the bridge, played that whole tourist role. Back in her room, I could hear faint laughter through the walls, light and musical, like another family settling in. "Next door must have kids, I guess," Ross said, shrugging. "At least it's not a bachelor party, right?" The units were standalone, separate from one another, so hearing other guests through the walls took some serious volume to do. And that laughter went on for hours, giggling, thumps, a woman's voice calling in soft tones. It made me feel oddly comforted, normal, alive. But when we stepped out that evening for dinner, everything kind of stopped. The trail that connected the houses went silent, and as soon as the door clicked shut behind us, I realized the houses close to us were blacked out, no lights inside. Downstairs near the foyer, a woman stood sorting towels, and I asked her, "Excuse me, do you know who's staying in the room next to ours? It sounds like a family, right?" She paused, trying to remember. That room's actually empty," she said. "Yeah, they canceled last week." Ross laughed it off. "Well, I guess the walls are pretty thin." But I saw the way the employee kind of looked at me, that small, careful smile that lingered for a little too long. And that night, around 2 a.m, the giggling would start up again. It was faint, right across the wall, then got louder, moving through the air like somebody circling our cabin. Ross mumbled something next to me about old pipes, but the sound was not mechanical at all. It was human. I pressed my ear to the wall, and there was this humming now, off-key, childlike. I shook Ross awake, and he listened too, and it instantly stopped. And for some reason, that scared me most of all. The next night it got worse. Footfalls moved back and forth just outside the door. Then came this shuffle, something brushing at the foot of our bed. The blanket shifted. I reached down and felt resistance. Something was pulling the blankets off of us. Ross snapped on the lamp and the room was empty. Nobody there. "All right, what the hell was that?" he asked me. "Old pipes," I said, dead serious, and he nodded. I think he finally started taking me seriously. I was ready to leave, but Ross said that we had to finish the weekend and then drive home early Monday. "You're letting it get into your head," he said, rubbing his face. "It's an old place, there's weird noises, that's all it is." "Okay, then who was touching our blanket, Ross?" He didn't have an answer for me. That night the noises, of course, didn't stop. They got louder. Footsteps outside the cottage, and they stopped near the window, then started up again near the front door. No connecting steps, just this phantom movement. A soft tap, 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 fingers drumming this rhythm on the glass. Then a thud and the wall shook. Something had hit it from the other side hard enough to rattle the lamp, and a woman's cry would quickly follow. Then the sound of glass breaking. Ross jumped up and yanked open the front door. There was nobody outside, just the simple crash of the tide. Vacant. Still, even with the door wide open, we could hear more laughter and clapping, but there was no sign of anybody. Ross closed it up and bolted it for the rest of the night. For obvious reasons, neither of us slept much. Every hour would come new sounds, the drag of feet in the dirt or moving fabric. Sometimes I'd feel the mattress dip beside me, a soft weight as if somebody had sat down. Near dawn, I felt this cold breath in my ear, a woman's whisper that I couldn't make out. Ross said that he didn't hear it. He turned his back to me and muttered something about checking it out first thing, but we were done with that place. Morning came and somehow we stayed. Maybe pride, maybe denial, and I remember opening up the curtain, seeing the fog rolling up the bluff and thinking to myself, if we leave now, we'll never really understand what that was. But it was a mistake. By the last morning, the house had completely changed. The laughter next door was no longer laughter anymore. It was just crying. Not muffled or distant, but right there, just through the wall. A woman's voice was now begging. The sound rose and fell with heavy bangs, furniture scraping, glass shattering. Ross threw on his clothes and stormed outside, and I followed behind, but the second he reached for the knob to the next door, the noise would stop. He opened the door anyway, and it was pretty much the same as ours. Bed neatly made, blinds drawn, lights off. There was zero evidence of anybody ever being inside. I stepped in behind him, half expecting to feel something in the air, a temperature drop or the tingle of static, but what hit me instead was sweetness, thick like old perfume, like the kind of grandmother would wear. I couldn't breathe it in, otherwise I'd gag. Ross turned to me and said, "All right, let's just get the hell out of here." At the office, the staff went about their morning like nothing was wrong, bacon on the griddle, dishes clinking. The woman from before smiled when she saw us, asked if we slept well. I wanted to scream in her smiling face. At checkout, I mentioned the noise, the crying, the footsteps. I said somebody needed to check that room. A clerk, a younger woman than the first, just laughed at me. "Oh, well, that's probably Rue," she said. "She likes to make trouble for some of our guests." "Rue?" I asked her. She nodded, cheerful, like we weren't even talking about dead people. Yeah, it's our ghost. Lived here for over 100 years. They say she watches over the lighthouse. Sometimes she gets a little playful. I froze. My name's Rue too, I said, short for Ruby. The clerk's smile then widened. Well, that's probably why she wanted to say hello. It's been a few months since you bothered anybody, right, Marge? Yep, that's right, the other woman said. Ross did this half-assed laugh and paid and then guided me toward the door. Outside, the lighthouse towered over the fog, its beam cutting through the gray like a titan. I stared up at it, feeling something that I can't quite explain or tell you, like I was sharing a body with another person. We drove off without another word, and we haven't been back to Oregon since, at least not together. Ross goes back for work trips every now and again, but he stays far, far away from the Heceta Head Lighthouse. I've lived in Oregon pretty much my whole life. I'm Oregon to the bone, you could say. I have a favorite rain jacket and I keep the Blazers on the radio when I make dinner. Winters, I follow hockey close enough to annoy my friends. Summers, I get outside because how can you not? When the storms roll through and the ground drinks deep, I head for the timber. Mushroom hunting was my dad's thing first and then it became mine. It's simple, boots, basket, knife. After a good rain, the forest will wake up and you can spend a day without seeing anybody else. I stick to habits, park at the same pullouts, hike the same roads until the dirt gives way to duff, scan the deadfall, the mossy humps, she thick, the shadows under the sword ferns. It isn't about money or rare finds, it's about the quiet, the smell of wet bark, the way the canopy eats the sound of the highway until all you hear is drip and bird chatter. I'm not a reckless guy. I text where I'm going, I check the radar, I carry a whistle and a lighter, but after this last run, after what I ran into, I don't go alone anymore. The week the rain had let up, my buddies had bailed. Family stuff, work stuff, whatever. I went anyway. The forecast told me that we had 2 clear days. The last storm had been a soaker. I drove out my ratty Tacoma past the regular pullout, then past the one after that. The further I went, the less I could read the signs. The second growth had gave way to older timber. The path had narrowed to mud with mossy skin. I parked on a turnout and called it good. No other rigs. Fresh cuts in the roadway. I texted a pin to our group chat. Beyond spot C, back by dark. Then I shouldered my basket and got to stepping. It was good country out there. Sword ferns, rotten logs with furred moss, alder mixed with fur that shut out in the light. I cut a few chanterelles, then a patch of hedgehogs near a blowdown. I kept going, drawn by that untouched ground, checking for prints and not really seeing any. No other boots, no bike tracks, no dog paws, only freckles of deer scat and deep cups of elk track. I'd say an hour in, I stopped on this knoll above a trickle stream and rolled up a joint. Out there, it feels harmless. I cut the ember and took a few slow pulls. The smoke settled my mind and made it easier to hunt the mushrooms. I stubbed it, pinched the roach into an empty trail mix bag, and moved on. I marked my path, kinked alder, broken branch, small cairns, and then zigzagged up the slope, scanning stump skirts and the thick rim of dirt where caps would hide. It was good picking. A few more cuts filled up my basket bottom. I felt alone, in a good way, an old way. Then the brush behind me grunted. I froze and instinct told me, bear. I turned slow, thumb on the whistle, the other hand on my little knife that I carried for stems. The plants shivered around me and the branch parted. And 2 men pushed out. They wore this generic hiker clothing, thrifted shells, caps, day packs, but their faces were very suspicious, shifty-eyed and dirty. Hey, this gap-toothed one said, hands up. Look at that, scored pretty good, huh? I kept my voice easy. Just some chanterelles, there's plenty around. The other one sniffed long and deep, and he smiled without looking at my basket. You out here alone, man? Nah, my friends are up the ridge. I lied. They laughed. Gaptooth nodded. That smell you? Smell? He spread his fingers near his nose and did this exaggerated inhale. That good, that loud, we've been following it. The other one added, almost a mile now. My throat went dry and I patted my pockets, slow, checking for my keys. The roach was in a can, but I still had a small baggie with 2 nugs left. Yeah, I smoked it earlier, I said. Not much left now. Gaptooth smiled again. You still got it? They stepped to me and I realized that I was done for. My vision went tunnel and I started to panic. Fellas, look, I said. I'm just out here to hunt. I don't want any trouble. Then don't make any, the sniffer said. Just show us. I took a step left and they took 2. My knee buzzed with that pre-run charge. I looked past them, picked a line between a cedar and a blowdown. I could make it. Gaptooth then held out his palm. Come on, man. Share. I snapped the basket strap tight across my chest with one hand and did a feint to the right. Then I ran. The forest went alive around me, ravens snapping limbs, my own breath hammering in my ears. Behind me came whoops like coyotes on a kill. Get him! One shouted. I didn't look back. The ground fell away into this dark slick with moss and runoff. I hit it sideways and rolled, came up running. My boots snagged a root and nearly sent me face first into a log. Behind me, they were only a few feet away. I could actually smell them, sweat and wood smoke. And the whooping had stopped. Then came panting, heavy and very out of shape. My hand went to my pocket without thinking. The baggie was still there, 2 crumpled up nugs. I yanked it out, turned, and when a shape lunged through the brush, I slammed the bag into his chest. There, just take it! I shouted. He caught it with both hands, staring dumbly, then began laughing, full, frantic laughter that made my stomach turn. The other man burst through the brush beside him and joined in, howling, jumping like they'd won some kind of prize. They didn't come after me again. I, however, didn't stop running until I saw the gray glint of my truck trees. My hands were shaking so bad, I dropped my keys before even getting the door open. I tore out of there, grateful to be alive. I still can't stop replaying it though, their faces, the sound of their feet, the smell. I tell myself over and over they were just some kind of attic or squatters protecting something out there. And, of course, I guess I don't really need to say this, but it goes without saying that my police report came back with 0 results.